Hello, and welcome to Sharp Story. Here we share powerful stories of love and the emotional journeys that lead to healing. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon so you never miss an update. Let's explore the beauty and strength of human emotions together. After Barron Trump became the butt of a joke, Melania's daring move inspired a cultural reckoning. Disposition When Barron Trump was the butt of a joke, Melania's scandal was born a cultural reckoning. The night was typical of late-night television and the world it occupies. It was an evening like any other in the world of late-night television. The crowd at the Burbank, California studio laughed along as the host, known for his acerbic wit and politically tinged humor, made jokes at the expense of public figures. At the studio in Burbank, California, where the show is based, audience members chuckled at the host's biting wit and politically charged humor as he cracked jokes at the expense of public figures. But then came a left turn, and he did turn to Barron Trump, son of the former First Lady and the former president. But then, in a surprising pivot, he focused the audience's attention on Barron Trump, the youngest son of the former First Lady and president. It was a fast, sharp, and clear-shot joke, billed directly at the teenager. The joke was swift, biting, and clearly directed at the teenager. The audience rang with mixed laughter, some chuckling unsurely, some shifting in their seats. The audience chuckled with a mixture of strained laughter and uncomfortable shifting in their seats. The comment wasn't just a playful jab, it was a wound a little deeper, one directed at the child of a public figure who had mostly avoided the media glare. The comment was not merely a tongue-in-cheek joke. It was a cutting insult aimed at the child of a public figure who had partaken in very little public life. The clip spread, within hours, everywhere. In hours, the clip was ubiquitous. As a result of all of these factors, it wasn't long before social media exploded with hashtags like #BarronTrump on Twitter, and Instagram virtually rocketed nonstop for 24 hours, while memes and reactions flooded timelines. Everyone from the Trump family's most outspoken supporters to the most intense critics of the host rushed to express their opinion of what had happened. Some people simply called the joke in bad taste and unnecessary. Others defended it as just comedy. News outlets picked up the story very quickly, examining every angle of the controversy and sparking fierce debates over the boundary lines of humor. A couple of days later, at home in Palm Beach, Melania Trump watched the clip in disbelief. Since she was a little single mother in a sealskin coat driving her tot champ around New York City to help Barron become a nice kid was the only thing she truly put over him. Not only was the insult hurled at Barron, but then she was the only mother who could whip it for her. She realized it was a situation she couldn't overlook. Her parental instincts kicked in, and she started composing a very short, straightforward statement on the situation. But this time, words weren't enough. But this time words were not sufficient. As the backlash grew louder, Melania made a decision that would reverberate in the media. As the criticism surged, Melania made a move that sent ripples across the media. She would file a lawsuit. But what she wasn't aware of was that this decision would ignite a fight much bigger than she could have imagined. But little did she know that this choice would ignite a battle much bigger than she could ever have imagined. The next morning, Melania Trump's team put out a statement to the press. Melania Trump's team issued to the press a statement. It was measured but stern, calling the TV host's comments inappropriate and harmful. It was sober but harsh, condemning the TV host's remarks as inappropriate and harmful. Though her word resonated with her backers, it was insufficient to silence a mounting firestorm. Though her word resonated with her supporters, it wasn't enough to silence the mounting controversy. It wasn't that Melania was mad. She was determined. But Melania wasn't just mad. She was determined. As a public figure, she had long been part of the realm of criticism and ridicule. For years, she had faced criticism and ridicule as a public figure. But this attack on her son felt personal, and she was ready to fight back. She was determined to retaliate. He approached one of the nation's top defamation lawyers, a no-nonsense woman with a penchant for high-profile victories. She sought out one of the country's leading defamation lawyers, a woman with a no-nonsense demeanor and a resume of high-profile victories. They sued the host and the network, claiming defamation and intentional infliction of emotional distress. They filed a lawsuit against the host and the network, accusing them of defamation and intentional infliction of emotional distress. The legal filing painted a grim picture. The legal filing presented a grim picture. The comment, though couched in humor, crossed a line. That comment, however much it was framed as a form of humor, crossed a line. This was never about free speech anymore. It was no longer a matter of free speech. It was about honoring a child's right to privacy and dignity. It was a matter of protecting a child's right to privacy and dignity. The lawsuit itself became a media spectacle. Even the lawsuit became a media event. News anchors argued about whether Melania's case had merit or whether it was just a tactical play for relevance. There was also debate among news anchors about whether Melania had a case or this was all for Trump, what was just a cynical ploy for her to remain relevant in life. Supporters praised her bravery and referred to her as a lioness defending her cub, while critics accused her of using the lawsuit as a publicity tool. Supporters hailed her bravery and characterized her as a ferocious mother fighting for her son, and critics attacked her for using the lawsuit to raise her profile. Barron, for his part, avoided the spotlight. Barron, for his part, kept a lower profile. Friends of the family said he was a quiet teenager who rarely interacted with the media circus that surrounded his family. Friends from his youth described him as a quiet teenager who seldom interacted with the media frenzy that followed his family. Melania's actions, however, spoke louder than words. But Melania's actions speak louder than words. She was not fighting to protect her reputation. She was fighting to protect his. She wasn't defending her reputation. She was defending his. The lawsuit had an immediate effect. The lawsuit had an immediate effect. Sponsors started to pull away from the late-night show amid concerns about bad press. The late-night show lost sponsors that began distancing themselves from negative press. His host, a particular fount of self-assuredness, sounded vaguely cowed in his next few broadcasts. The host, never shy on camera, seemed subdued during his following broadcasts. But he wouldn't apologize, insisting that he had a right to free speech and calling the lawsuit an assault on comedy as a whole. And yet, he would not apologize, but rather doubled down on his right to free speech, calling the suit an attack on comedy itself. But by the day's end, the story had only gotten bigger, pulling in voices from all across the country, and the fight was only starting. But as the days unfolded, the story became bigger still, drawing in voices from all corners of the country, and the fight was only just starting. The lawsuit set off a firestorm on every media platform. The lawsuit set off a firestorm on every media platform. Cable news channels spent hours on panel discussions, online comment threads crackled with debate, and podcasts broke down the situation from every direction. Cable news networks spent hours on panel discussions, online platforms lit up with arguments, and podcasts broke down the crisis from every direction. The nation appeared divided right down the middle. The country appeared to be split just about 50-50. On one side were those who praised Melania for standing up to what they accused of as bullying in the veiled form of comedy. On one side were those who praised Melania for standing up to what they called bullying in the guise of comedy. Her decision resonated with parents in particular, who flooded social media with messages of support. Her decision particularly struck a chord with parents, who flooded social media with messages of support. Protecting our kids should never be a question, one viral post said, along with a photo of Barron from his father's presidency. There should never be a question of how to protect our kids. Read one viral post that included a picture of Barron during his father's time in office. But the backlash on the other side was fierce. On the other hand, though, the backlash was fierce. Comedians and talk show hosts sided with their embattled peer, saying that the lawsuit would set a dangerous precedent for creative expression. Comedians and talk show hosts rallied behind their embattled peer, arguing that the lawsuit established a dangerous precedent for creative expression. Others defended the satire of public figures, including their families, no matter how young they were on the age spectrum. Others said public figures, even their families, were fair game for satire, and even so, age should not matter. If you don't know how to take a joke, you shouldn't make it to public life, one prominent host stated during a heated argument on his show. If you can't take a joke, you shouldn't be in the public eye, one of the prominent hosts declared in a heated debate on his program. The discussion overflowed into coffee shops, workplaces, and dinner tables. The discussion has spilled from the media into coffee shops, offices, and dinner tables. College students debated free speech in Los Angeles during a campus rally. In Los Angeles, college students wrestled with the ethics of free speech at a campus rally. Sitting inside a small diner in Topeka, the retirees debated whether the host had crossed a line. In a Topeka, Kansas diner, a handful of retirees debated whether the host had ventured too far. It was no longer only Melania and Barron's story. It was no longer only about Melania and Barron. It was about what sort of behavior society was willing to overlook in the name of entertainment. It was a question of what sort of behavior society was willing to put up with under the guise of entertainment. Through the chaos, the late-night host kept resisting. Under the chaos, the late-night host kept fighting back. His monologues grew more defiant, cast himself as a victim of censorship. His monologues grew bolder, casting him as the target of censorship. His fans cheered him on, while his detractors noted that his jests had developed a sharper, even bitter edge. His fans cheered him on. His critics noted that the humor had registered just a degree, if not too, sharper, almost bitter. The former charismatic figure now appeared heavy with the controversy surrounding him. He was a shadow of the former charismatic figure who had once thrilled the nation with his speeches, now mired by the controversy surrounding him. Networks were also under pressure. Networks had their share of pressure, too. The host's show ratings started to decline, and rumors spread that executives were rethinking their support. The host's show started to lose viewers, and speculation emerged that some executives were having second thoughts about standing by him. A legal team for Melania acted with urgency. To the contrary, Melania's lawyers acted quickly. The legal struggle was no longer solely a personal battle, as they added more evidence and statements in an attempt to bolster their case. Filing more evidence and statements to bolster their case, the legal fight became more than a personal battle. It was primed to become a cultural reckoning. It was turning into a cultural reckoning. But no one was anticipating the bombshell that was set to drop, one that threatened to turn the tide of the entire lawsuit. No one could have seen the twist coming that was about to upend everything, potentially changing the very nature of the lawsuit. Once the trial commenced in Los Angeles Superior Court, it became the kind of spectacle that the media could not resist. When the trial started in Los Angeles Superior Court, it turned into a spectacle the media couldn't resist. Paparazzi flooded the courthouse steps. Paparazzi crowded the courthouse steps, taking pictures of Melania Trump walking in fitted sophistication, surrounded by her lawyers. Photographing Melania Trump arriving in tailored elegance with her legal team. On the other, the late-night host walked in alongside his lawyers, his face fixed in a resolute expression. From the other side, the late-night host walked in flanked by his attorneys, his face set with purpose. Inside, anticipation crackled in the air. The atmosphere inside buzzed with anticipation. It was more than a trial, it was a referendum on contemporary entertainment. This wasn't simply a trial, it was a referendum on contemporary entertainment. The prosecution began with a blistering argument, stressing the boundary between comedy and cruelty. The prosecution began a searing argument about the line between comedy and cruelty. They showed the courtroom a clip of the offending joke. They played a recording of the offending joke for the courtroom. The words resounded in the stillness of the chamber, and Melania's lawyer told the story of how the comment had troubled her son, whose teenage years had unfolded amid the crossfire of media sensationalism. Over the sound of silence in the chamber, Melania's lawyer described how the remark affected her son deeply, a teenager caught in the media's crosshairs. "This is not a free speech issue," the lawyer countered, her voice firm. "This has nothing to do with free speech," the lawyer insisted, her voice steady. "This is about a child's right to grow up without being mocked for sport. This is about a child's right to not grow up as someone who is the subject of jokes for sport." The defense, though, took a different tack. The defense, though, had a different tactic. They relied heavily on the First Amendment, arguing that the freedom of comedy, no matter how offensive, should be safeguarded. They relied heavily on the First Amendment, contending that comedy, no matter how offensive, merits protection. As their case unfolded, the host's legal team cited decades of precedent supportive of their argument, depicting him as an artist misunderstood for pushing boundaries. The team laid out decades of precedents that they argued supported their case, describing him as a misunderstood artist pushing boundaries. At one point, the host himself took the stand, giving an impassioned testimony about his career and how the lawsuit could quash creativity. At one point, the host himself took the stand, giving an impassioned account of his career and how the lawsuit had threatened to snuff out creativity. The courtroom became a theater of contending ideologies. It was a theater of clashing ideologies in the courtroom. As both sides called witnesses to support their arguments, Barron's former teachers spoke of his quiet demeanor and how the media. As both sides called witnesses to advance their cases, Barron's former teachers testified about his quiet demeanor and how the media. His schooling had been affected by scrutiny. The defense, meanwhile, called comedians, who found a way to argue passionately that satire was an important, even critical part of society's commentary. Meanwhile, the defense called comedians who argued vigorously that satire was an important form of social commentary. Public interest in the case soared to a fever pitch. Interest in the case reached a fever pitch in public. Every nuance, from Melania's smile at the right moment to the host's anger at all the right parts, was dissected and discussed across every dominant platform. Every nuance, from Melania's composed reactions to the host's passionate jabs, was scrutinized and debated across all the major platforms. Late-night shows across the country steered completely clear of jokes about the trial. Late-night shows nationwide steered clear of jokes about the trial entirely, and afraid of being the next target of public scrutiny. Fearful of unwittingly becoming the next subject of public scrutiny. But just as the trial appeared to be settling into a steady rhythm, a new witness arrived on the scene and flipped the case and public perceptions upside down. But just as the trial appeared to be lulling into a familiar groove, a new witness arrived, flipping the case and public perception on its head. Just another day in court took a dramatic turn when the prosecution introduced a surprise witness. On what otherwise appeared to be an ordinary day in court, the atmosphere turned dramatically when the prosecution said it would present a surprise witness. A former employee of the network that aired the late-night show walked into the courtroom, and the defense team shot each other nervous looks. The defense team, seated around the table at the front of the courtroom, exchanged nervous looks as a former employee of the network that aired the late-night show walked through the courtroom doors. William Carter, he was named, a former production assistant who had worked on the show for more than 5 years. He had even been let go under murky circumstances. His name was William Carter, a production assistant who had spent more than 5 years working on the show until his firing under controversial circumstances. Carter's demeanor was measured, but resolute as he was sworn in. When Carter was sworn in, he was calm yet resolute. You could feel the tension in the room build as he started to speak. There was a palpable electricity in the air as he started speaking. He testified to the culture behind the scenes of the show, describing an atmosphere in which hitting things hard was often more important than ethics. He recounted the behind-the-scenes culture of the show, painting a picture of an environment in which pushing boundaries often trumped ethics. But his broad observations were not what shocked the courtroom. But it wasn't his broad observations that shocked the courtroom. It was the particular evidence he presented. From his briefcase, Carter pulled emails, scripts, and internal communications to reveal something much more damaging than anyone had anticipated. Out of his briefcase, Carter pulled emails, scripts, and internal communications that showed something far worse than anyone had anticipated. So the joke about Barron Trump wasn't something Carter said off the cuff. The joke about Barron Trump, according to Carter, was not an offhand comment. It had been planned and discussed and ultimately approved by people higher up in the network. It had been planned, discussed, and finally approved by higher-ups at the network. Even worse, some of the communications suggested that the joke was crafted not as a joke, but to elicit outrage and earn ratings. Even worse, Some of the correspondents made it sound like the joke was not so much written for purposes of humor as of provocation and ratings. Gasps echoed in the courtroom as the documents appeared on the screen. Gasps went through the courtroom when the documents were shown on a screen. In one especially incriminating email, an executive wrote, "It's kind of like we don't exist." One executive wrote in a particularly damning email, "It'll get people talking. It'll get people talking. Controversy sells. Controversy sells." The focus of the trial turned for the first time away from the host and toward the corporate machinery that allowed the incident to happen. For the first time, the trial's attention turned away from the host and, instead, toward the corporate machinery that had made the incident possible. The defense stuttered to recover, maintaining that the host had acted on his own and that the network's decisions regarding how to cover the topic were irrelevant to the case. The defense scrambled to bounce back, arguing that the host had acted on his own and that the decisions of the network were not an issue in the case. But the damage was done. But the damage was done. Carter's testimony had sown a lingering doubt, not only over the joke, but the basis behind it. Carter's testimony had sown a doubt, not just about the joke, but about its motives. The revelations sent shockwaves through the media industry outside the courthouse. The revelations sent shockwaves through the media industry outside the courthouse. Headlines blared about the poisonous culture at the network, and several of its executives were suspended with pay, pending the outcome of an internal investigation. Headlines blared about a toxic culture inside the network, and several of its top executives were put on administrative leave while the network conducted an internal investigation. The host who had been the face of edgy comedy was now alone. The host, who had once been the face of edgy comedy, now felt alone. His own employers having no desire to back him. His own employers unwilling to support him. But as the tide turned in Melania's favor, the case was far from finished, and the final verdict would bring consequences that no one could have predicted. But even as the tide shifted toward Melania, the case was by no means over, and its final verdict would have implications that no one had anticipated. As the trial neared the end, the room was filled to capacity. By the time the trial reached its end, and a viably full courtroom was amassed, reporters packed the gallery, leaving no line without note. The journalists filled the gallery, their pens primed to write every detail. Outside, there were throngs of both Melania Trump supporters and people rallying for the late-night host. Outside, crowds divided, some supporting Melania Trump, others the late-night host. And the stakes were higher than ever. This time the stakes were higher than ever. The timing was important. Public opinion had swung dramatically with the bombshell evidence from William Carter, and in their closing Melania's lawyer delivered a barn-burning argument. With public opinion moving in a torrential fashion following the bombshell revelations of William Carter, during closing arguments Melania's lawyer made a bold proclamation. She wasn't just advocating for her client, but for every family that had been thrust into the spotlight against their will. She was not just advocating for her client, but for every family who had been thrust into the public eye against their will. "This is not about quieting comedy," she said in tone both steady and firm. "This is not about canceling comedy," she said, her voice steady and strong. "This is about accountability. This is about accountability. It's about recognizing the fact that our words, particularly the words that are shouted to millions, have consequences." The defense. "It's about realizing that our words, particularly those that are amplified to millions of people, have consequences." The defense. Punished but loyal, made one last appeal. Beaten down but resolute, made one last push. They cautioned that a ruling against the host could set a chilling precedent for comedians everywhere. They asserted that a ruling adverse to the host could have a chilling effect on comedians more broadly. "Where do we draw the line? Where do we draw the line?" They asked. At what point does protecting feelings limit the freedom to confront and to challenge? When does preserving feelings cross over into inhibiting the right to contest and incite? The verdict came after hours of deliberation by the jury. The jury emerged with its verdict after hours of deliberation. The host was found liable in defamation, and the network was ordered to pay huge damages for its role in creating a culture of sensationalism. The host was held liable for defamation, and the network was ordered to pay massive damages for its part in promoting a culture of sensationalism. But the judge clarified that the ruling wasn't an attack on free speech, but an acknowledgement that humor cannot come at the expense of a child's dignity. The judge emphasized, though, that the ruling wasn't a strike on free speech, but an acknowledgement that humor cannot come at the expense of a child's dignity. The verdict shook the media world. The decision sent shockwaves through the media world. It was a bittersweet victory for Melania. For Melania, it was a bittersweet victory. She had fought for her son and had prevailed, but it had been a draining experience. She had defended her son and prevailed, but that had taken a toll. In a statement, she said she hoped the case would be a reminder that public discourse must be based on care and respect, a point that allies of President Biden have acknowledged and one that he has attempted to about-face on during the case. Speaking briefly to reporters, she said the case could be an important lesson in reminding people to be more careful and respectful in public discourse. The fallout was harsh for the host. The consequences were stark for the host. Sponsors deserted him, his network distanced itself from him, and his show was put on indefinite hold. Sponsors withdrew, his network backed away, and his show was suspended indefinitely. But the case also ushered in important conversations. But the case also sparked important conversations. Around the country, people debated the limits of comedy, the responsibilities of public figures, and the ethics of media sensationalism. In homes and offices around the country, people debated the limits of comedy, the obligations of public figures, and the ethics of media sensationalism. In the weeks that followed, new initiatives arose to address the toxic culture in entertainment. In the weeks to come, initiatives arose to combat the toxic workplace culture in entertainment. Comedians started looking hard at their own material, networks adopted stricter oversight, and audiences became more selective about what they would help pay for. Comedians started vetting their material more closely, networks instituted stricter oversight, and audiences became more careful about what they would embrace. And through all of it, one lesson has become clear. And through it all, one lesson stood out. That right may be free speech, but respect and empathy are responsibilities we all bear. Free speech is inalienable. Treating others with respect and empathy is a responsibility we all should take seriously. And as the dust started to settle, the nation found itself pondering the trial's implications for life in America. As the dust started to settle, the country found itself considering the broader significance of the trial. Discussion turned from the details of the case to the larger cultural questions it raised. Conversations moved away from the details of the case to the larger cultural issues it brought to the fore. Where is the line between funny and harmful? When does something become funny instead of harmful? How do we strike a balance between free speech and accountability? How do we exercise free speech and also be held accountable? Melania's battle was a wake-up call for many parents. For countless parents, Melania's struggle was an eye-opener. It reminded them of the need to advocate for their children in an increasingly digital and unforgiving world. It reminded them of the extent to which they will need to stand up for their children in an increasingly digital and unforgiving world. One mother in Des Moines expressed her feelings in a viral video. In Des Moines, one mother offered her perspective in a viral video. If a woman with most of Melania Trump's advantages can experience such a painful journey, what does that say about the rest of us? If someone with Melania Trump's reach can go through this kind of struggle, what does that say for the rest of us? This trial was not just about Barron. This trial was not only about Barron. It was about all our kids. It was about all our kids. For the entertainment industry, the verdict felt like a reckoning. It was a comeuppance for the entertainment world. And networks and production companies began rethinking how to approach comedy, recognizing that controversy-fueled cheap shots cost them. An era in comedy was over, but networks and production companies would need to reconsider what worked when tackiness came with a price tag. The trial served as an inspiration for a renewed focus on crafting humor that pushed the envelope without putting down people. The trial sparked a fresh effort to write funny, but not hate-filled, gags that challenged norms without ridiculing people. In the streets, in homes, and in classrooms, people began talking about the ripples their words and actions create. On the streets, in homes, and across classrooms, people started talking about the ripple effects of their words and actions. The trial revealed how something as innocuous as a joke could degenerate into an extended, serious discussion about values, ethics, and respect. The trial revealed how the simplest of statements can tumble into a bigger talk about values, ethics, and respect. But the impact of the story went beyond Barron, Melania, or the host. But it wasn't just Barron, Melania, or the host that the story affected. It became a cultural touchstone showing that although we have the freedom to speak, we must also take heed of the power of our words. It became a cultural moment that helped show that though we have a right to free speech, we must also be mindful of what we say. Humor can bring us together, but it can also drive us apart, and the onus to make smart choices in this regard lies with us all. Humor can also divide, and it is up to all of us to be responsible while choosing. And so as the cameras turned off and the world moved on, one message stuck. And so as the cameras stopped rolling and life went on, one message stayed. Compassion has to be the priority always. He may always come before compassion. The trial's over, but what it left behind is more timely than ever. The trial may be over, but the lessons it left in its wake are more timely than ever. It's up to all of us to make sure that our words create bridges, not walls, and that we challenge each other respectfully, not cruelly. It's all on us to make sure the words we speak and write build bridges, not walls, and that our challenges to others are with respect, not cruelty. Let's continue these conversations and move towards a world in which we can laugh, disagree, and grow without resorting to tearing each other down. Let's keep these dialogues up as we continue toward a world where we can laugh, disagree, and evolve without tearing each other down. If you found this story meaningful, let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please share your thoughts in the comments below. Please remember to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for other stories that may change the way you see everything around the world. Also, remember to like, subscribe, and tap the bell to get updates on more stories that will change the way you see the world.